Hello and welcome along to the Champion Chase preview from our Cheltenham series. I'm your host Daniel Hussey, joined by the usual crew of Micheál, Deasy and Matt Toombs. Before we get into what has been a wild morning in terms of price movements here, given Allaho's missing Cheltenham Festival in the Ryanair, Deasy, you had a great weekend of tipping on the Matchbook horse racing pot.
Yeah, it was happy Chris Gordon Day on Saturday. I followed him in on his two winners, and there was a few other hit the frame as well. So yeah, it was a good Saturday.
Yeah, listen, Deasy's the man to be watching for those mundane Saturdays, I always say. Matt Toombs, over to you. Cheltenham is 4 weeks tomorrow. It's amazing. It's just almost creeping up on us all of a sudden.
It is, and such a shame with the news about Allaho missing the Ryanair chase this morning. He'll be a veteran next year, and he's going to be another of these elite horses we're probably never going to get to see run in a championship race, the festival now.
Yeah.
But the two Ryanair wins, albeit against lesser opposition, were absolutely brilliant on the eye.
Yeah, no, and it's a pity. Hopefully he'll get back to another festival, but that Punchestown Gold Cup performance last year just shows the quality of this horse. As we've been doing every episode, and thanks for all the comments and feedback, and we do read every single one of them. There's another £25 free bet to be won. If you are listening on the podcast, head over to the YouTube video and comment anything you like, feedback for the guys. Maybe a little thanks to Deasy for all the winners he gave you over the weekend. Whatever what you want to do. With What's Rare is Wonderful, Deasy, do comment below, or even let us know your nap for the Cheltenham Festival. Before I slag Deasy anymore, let's take a look at the betting for the Champion Chase. And the Allaho news has kind of moved this market a little bit. So, and I'll explain all that in a second. So, Nergaming and Edwardstone are the 3.0 favourites, joint favourites. Editor to G is 9.6. Blue Lord, which you can see just ahead, was the third favourite, but has been drifting since he could probably go to the Ryanair now. But he is 14.0 if they do rerun him here in the Champion Chase market. Gentlemen, to me, the same price, 14.0, and it's 23.0 bar. You've the likes of Nuba Negra, etc. there. So, Matt, before we get into maybe selections, a little bit on trends on this course and this course and distance, basically, in the Champion Chase.
Yeah, it's a predictable race. 2 mile chasing's the most specialist division, but there are two trends we often talk about that contradict each other slightly. The first one of them is that 18 of the last 24 winners have come from the front two in the SP market. Only 4 of those 24 have gone off bigger than 7.0. So very few horses can run fast enough and then jump fast enough to win a champion chase. Outsiders winning and causing a real surprise are really rare. The flip side of that is there is very little margin for error, even though there are the less stiff fences these days. So there is quite a bit of uncertainty about which of those very small number of top horses will put it together on the day. And therefore you're looking towards the front of the market, but not necessarily the favourites who don't have that strong a record.
Okay, so that's an interesting trend to start with. It's always good when we you just focus on the top of the SP market. There won't be any late flyers in this sort of race. DC, over to you first before we bring Matt in some other trends. What horse do you like in the top of the betting? And maybe talk us through your thoughts on those first 4 or 5 horses.
Yeah, I suppose my selection is a bit of a boring one. It's Edwardstone. He's joint favourite now. I think he should be favourite really. As Matt will allude to there with a few of the trends, like he fits a lot of them. He's last year's Arkle winner. He is probably unlucky to not have a few more wins. He won his seasonal debut where he absolutely hammered Grenadine in the Tingle Creek. 1.9 lengths was just going away from up the hill at Sandown, which I think is probably the best bit of form in this division all year. Unseated there at Christmas at Kempton when Editor G won the race, and again the last time at Cheltenham, I just thought maybe that they let Editor G get away from him, that he was held up a bit too much, and if he had gone a second or two earlier, he would have caught him, and he was only beaten ahead. For all that, Editor G was a good winner and has been probably the surprise package in the division of the year. But I still think that Edwardstone probably should be favourite. His price down on 3.0. He's not going to be much lower or much bigger than that in the day, but I found it hard to find something. I suppose because we're so close to it, something that's going to shorten drastically. There's no more trials now for this. The only thing that's going to move the market is some injury news, something like that. But on the day, I will be backing Edwardstone.
Okay. Yeah, you definitely like him over in Nergamine. And look, Matt, point listeners in the right direction of a trend. Like obviously everyone knows the Arkle winners and the way they kind of follow up into the champion chase. But even you take someone like Put the Kettle On, she wasn't really a fancy, sexy horse, and then on the day she actually ended up winning the champion chase and backed up that Arkle winners trend, which is huge, really.
It is. Arkle winners this century are 7 from 12 in the next season's champion chase, 186% profit backing the blind, which is a very big profit for such an obvious trend. And as you said, Put the Kettle On was heavily backed in, went off 9.5. Sizing Europe went off 11.0. So they don't necessarily get overbet as you might imagine an Arkle winner would.
Yeah, absolutely. And then looking at, so for yourself selection, maybe Matt, talk us through initially the top 2 in the market, and maybe if you could separate them, pick one out, and then give us your selection in the actual race.
I've got a concern about Energumene. I started the season very positive about him. Okay. It's a bit the opposite when we did the Gold Cup the other day. I started negatively about Braeban's game and then have warmed to him as the season's gone on. Here it's the opposite. And the reason for that is not his ability, it's purely the track. Last season, his main 2 rivals didn't get round. And so when they came to the business end, he was able to go really wide into the straight. He continued to drift up until Paul Townend straightened him up late on. And when you're an elite horse beating 159 rated rival on bad ground that spaces horses out, you can get away with that. Made sense for Paul to allow him to stay wide and drift further right. And I wondered what he would do in a battle on the old course, especially on decent ground where they were going flat out. I thought he might have enough in hand to give away the ground. But the Clarence House, which was run on the new course, less sharply left-handed, especially on the turn into the home straight, and dispelled that illusion. He only shifts rather than really jumps right, but he looked a fair way below form, looking held before that mistake at the last. It just looks as if he wasn't that comfortable at the track. And it's going to be even harder for him in the champion chase on the old course, given that sharper provides more of a jumping challenge for horses that like to shift right. The most difficult fence is the 5th by the best mate enclosure. And on the new course, there isn't a fence on that part of the track. So that's going to be more difficult for him. And then he'll have to face this much sharper swing into the home straight. The second last comes up so quickly. So I've changed my mind now. I think he's a favourite to take on. And if I was given a free bet and had to back one of the 2 favourites, I'd go with Edwardstone.
Okay, so support for Deasy's selection perhaps, but it isn't out of the top of the market. You don't have a free bet here, Matt. You have free reign to choose a selection to pick at the current prices that you think will be a shortener on the day, and you are going to go with Editor Digit.
I am purely on a value play, and that's what we're looking for here. He's been hugely progressive when front running over 2 miles on a sound surface. Won 4 handicaps in a row under those conditions in 2021, the last off 147. Wasn't suited by the swamp in the Grand Annual last year, but still ran well to be 4th. A lot of eyebrows were raised when he was held up on his seasonal reappearance, but normal service was resumed in the Desert Orchid Chase, made all, thrashed Nubie Negra by 13 lengths when in receipt of £6. Not exactly sure what sort of form Nubie Negra's in, but in theory, that's a pretty good performance. With Edwardstone chipping up, it was regarded as a bit of a fluke, but Editor Digit showed it wasn't when out battling Edwardstone in the Clarence House. Really game when headed on the run-in. Yeah, Edwardstone, as Deasy pointed out, perhaps was given a little bit more to do and he was a bit gassy. But maybe Editor Digit was idling until Edwardstone got to him. Edwardstone got in front. It wasn't as if he didn't get there. And everyone seems to be assuming the form will get reversed in the champion chase. It may do, but I'm not convinced that the speed test is going to be over 133 yards shorter than the Clarence House, on the sharper old course, potentially on quicker ground. And I think that will suit Editor Digit better of the 2 because I think he's a speed horse. Edwardstone's a really strong stayer at the trip. And it's speed and jumping at speed that wins the champion chase. On a sound surface, the good jumpers don't get tired and they don't stop. And that may explain why the Desert Orchid has been an underestimated trial. It's over the sharp 2 miles at Kempton. Assuming the ground's decent, it's a real test of speed. Although the old course at Cheltenham's obviously a stiffer track, the champion chase is a more similar test of speed to the Desert Orchid than many punters think. And the trend is that winners of that season's Desert Orchid chase are 6 from 14, 144% profit backing those so far. And whilst the ground's officially soft, both of the Desert Walk and the Clarence House. It wasn't that deep. Times suggesting maybe more good to soft. And I think Editor de Gite will improve again if he gets goodish ground in the champion chase. So whilst it wouldn't surprise me if Edwardstone was up to reversing the form, the market's assuming that's very likely to happen. Yeah, it's not often you get a level weights trial over, if not quite course and distance, at least a similar test. And the second and third are 3.0 and the winner's 9.6. If you think about the implied probabilities there, which is what you need to do when betting, 3.0 gives a 33% chance of winning. 9.6 gives just under an 11% chance of winning. So what the market is saying is that the horses Editor de Gite beaten the Clarence House are 3 times more likely to win the champion chase than he is. And that can only be, I think, because punters are prejudiced against horses coming through the handicap ranks. It's what Editor de Gite can do now that matters, not what he was doing a couple of seasons ago. Gary Moore took the handicap route beside of Grugy the season he won. He scored in the handicap of 161 at Chepstow. So to my mind, Edwardstone's probably coming about the right price, and Nergamene's a bit short, as we'll come on to with your selection. Gentleman to me is the brave punter's selection, because he looks too big in the win market, but he's the type who could bomb out entirely. What Editor de Gite is, he's the one of those 4 who looks sure to run his race, but it's a price that will make him backable in both the win and the place market. So I think he's the solid betting proposition here.
Yeah, and look, you've outlined the differences between the old course and new course. Important for punters to realise that the Clarence House was run on the new course, and this will be run on the old course, as you touched on. So you mentioned brave punters, definitely one of them here, and I'm going for Gentleman to me and about 14.0. I was at Aintree the day he beat Edwardstone, and look, I know a lot came out that Edwardstone had a long season ahead of that, and the form was kind of written off. And I know you can't really take Aintree form literally for most kind of examples, and look, the start of this season kind of proved that. And I was going off my theory of maybe he's a spring horse, he's a good ground horse. And I had a small-ish bet on him in the Dublin Racing Festival. I wasn't confident at all, and neither were the Willie Mullins stable. I think he opened up at 9.5 in the ring, went off 8.5. So it was very little money for him really against Blue Lord. They really fancied Blue Lord. And while I accept Blue Lord underperformed, I was really impressed with Gentleman to me, the way he got on. That brilliant ride from Danny Mullins, the way he jumped. And I know there's a combination of reasons of why he overturned or won that race against Blue Lord, but I really do think out of all the examples, I think it's the theory of the spring ground and good ground and a spring horse. And I just think of the prices at 14.0. I think he's too big, because we've seen shocks in this race before. I know you've mentioned a lot of the SP favourites, and most of the winners have come out of the markets, but obviously Put the Kettle On as one at decent prices. And I just think on the day, this could be the horse that people latch on to Gentleman to me when they say, hang on, he's won the Irish Champion Chase or the Dublin Racing Festival 2-miler. So I just think of 14.0. He's beaten Edwardstone, who's 3.0. And if you do take that form, literally, this is a huge, huge price. But I just think if he gets into a rhythm, jumping wise, and on that good ground, I know there will be a bit of between him and Editor de Gite for making the running, perhaps, and Edwardstone and Nergamene will probably sit behind. And Nergamene be third and Edwardstone be fourth. But as long as they don't take each other on up front, I just think he'll trade shorter and running, and he's got a right chance of 14.0. So that would be my pick at the current prices. Deasy, we've kind of, and Matt touched on that most of the horses that are going to win this race, it's probably a simple betting race compared to other Cheltenham Festival races. So out of the top 4 in the betting, so we've got Nergamene, Edwardstone, Editor de Gite, Gentleman to me, that we all think will have decent chances. Anyone else that has a squeak, I know Grenadine lost at the weekend, but Paul Nicholls didn't have him right, and the stable isn't firing on all cylinders this weekend at the moment. So there's definitely a couple of flyers in the market, perhaps.
Yeah, I would be slow to part with money now for the rest of them. I thought Grenadine might be the old the sneaky each way a bit, but he was turned over at a very sharp price. He was very bad at the weekend. And like his Cheltenham farm is good, but not amazing. Like he was fourth in the Grand Annual, and he was well beaten here last year. Numa Negra maybe is the sleeper if he can get things back there, keeping him fresh for it. But there's nothing down the bottom of him there, like, because I think the top 4, top 5 is so heavily loaded that it's unlikely that there's going to be one of the big prize will sneak into third or fourth, and you're only going to get in the 3 places, I think, in this and the day. So I'd probably be sticking with Everstone, and I probably would be having a little sneaky bet half Gentleman to me as well if he turns up. I think he's a likeable horse the way he goes. But I think we've we've 3 good solid ones there. And on the day, I'll probably be I'll be laying an Orgamine anyway. I think I still don't think he has beaten a good horse, and he's probably shouldn't be the price he is now.
Yeah, you said that on the pod before the Clarence House, and definitely were 1 or 2 people not happy with it, but obviously it turned out that perhaps it is true. So yeah, essentially this podcast is laying an Erguine, Matt, but if you could give a squeak to anyone else, so like you've got the likes of Nuba Negra in there, like maybe a couple of years ago was giving, nearly beat Put the Kettle On when he was coming for his later on. You got Grenadine, you got Funabil Savola, you got Shaq and Poursuade 70.0, slightly interesting if he goes. Captain Guinness, same price, and then Course Sublime at 120.0. Does anything stand out there for anyone maybe looking at a wild price on the exchange, which is the best thing about betting on the exchange is on these Ante-Post markets?
Yeah, you could just about make cases for a couple of them. Nubi Negra, as you say, he has won 2-week renewals of the Schlur Chase over course and distance. Did disappoint his other runs, including when getting his ground in the Celebration Chase last April. He looked a short finisher a couple of seasons ago. I thought that with maturity, he'd see the trip out better. Perhaps be a Special Tiara type who won this late on in his career. Special Tiara won on his 4th attempt, age 10. And a few of Dan's weren't running well when he flopped in the Desert Orchid Christmas. So if you can make those sort of excuses, you could give him a bit of a squeak. If you forgive Grenadine the pretty disappointing run in the Game Spirit on Saturday, as Deasy says, the thing about him is going right-handed over fences. His form is 1-1-1, 2-1-4, 1-2, 1-1-2, and going left-handed, it's 1-4-3, 4-5-3. That sole win being a long odds on winner 3-runner novice at Fakenham. So I'm not convinced he's a Cheltenham horse, even though he ran fairly well in that Put the Kettle On Champion Chase. They went so slowly that year that it didn't spread the horses out. I imagine Paul will be prioritising the end of season Grade 1 at Sandown. Shaq and Poursuade, if you're trying to make excuses, you could say last year he was still running to a high 170s at his best at Leopardstown. Then Patrick came off him in the Champion Chase. They went far too slowly at Punchdown. He needs a fast run race. He's got a poor record fresh, so you forgive him Christmas. Then if he didn't stay in the Kinloch Bray, it's a heck of a lot of excuses and ifs. But if you're prepared to do all that, you could say fast run 2 miles. If he gets his jumping back together, he might go well at a huge price. And Blue Lord, with the Allaho news today, you've got to imagine is going to go for the Ryanair Chase now. Willie's got an Ergamine and Gentleman to me for this. Not clear what else he's going to have for the Ryanair Chase. So I think it's pretty unlikely. I wouldn't be backing Blue Lord Ante-Post for all, if you go on his Christmas run and forgive him last time, he'd have a decent chance as well. So bits and pieces of cases of very long odds, but I would be really surprised if the winner doesn't come from the front 4 in the market.
Yeah, no, look, and I thought it was important to cover as many horses as possible given the small amount of entries in there at the moment. So it's Edwardson for DC, it's Editor G for Matt in the win place markets, and then Gentleman to me for myself. Don't forget to like and comment on this video if you do want to win a £25 free bet in your Matchbook account, and we'll have that credited by this time next week. We'll be back next week with another Cheltenham pod. Until then, we'll chat to you then. Bye-bye.